we put them on that. They're so awesome.
No. I tried using it, but I can't together.
Literally?
Yes, sir. I'm just saying.
What are they doing now?
Well, it's working on both levels. Might be able to, so. That's a good way of testing this new air filter.
Yeah, see if it really works.
See if it really works.
Amigos Florida. Cut it out.
Good try.
I don't even have a stenographer yet, so this could be. So I called them. They said, you are caller number 29.
29.
29?
Jeez. It's insane.
Other side will be on hold.
The next
Time
4.5
will
hours.
be post-election.
Yeah.
It really collapsed by, like, how collapse you got. And,
Yeah.
the other side.
Did you already order the other ones?
No. The ones, the rubberized ones, yeah. But I did the ones you showed me, I thought were those, but those were the metal ones.
Yeah, they're the metal ones.
Whatever. What is it, steel iron or something?
Yeah, whatever.
The reason I wanted the other ones is because I could use them in my house. But I'll just put it in the garage.
Oh, I got a heater in my garage. Gets cold there now.
I'm sure.
just saying, it is if there's an issue.
What's the issue?
I don't know. He just asked if Joe could restart it. Hey, what?
Oh, you're talking about Robo.
Yeah. Yeah.
For a second, instead of backing up.
Gotcha.
I lost the handle on the front.
So.
You lost control of it? Stand by. Should be rebooting.
They need to say go away.
Really?
NBC News.
Maybe just power cycle somebody else.
No, this is ours.
Okay.
We do it again.
Yeah, I see it.
It's the DC in. I unplugged the DC in.
Now she Okay. Let's back up. Still have control over it.
Really?
You have no control over it?
No.
Alright. How much time before the briefing, I guess that's what
I think we still got a minute. There's like nobody's out here yet. You want me to leave it out for a few seconds? Like 20 seconds?
Yeah, pull it down out again. Let me see it go away. Yeah, let's count to 10. After the briefing, if you have time, I'm gonna see a picture of a DS4 that's in the back of the console, and then I'll ask you to reboot that DS4. But you can do that after the briefing if you have time.
Okay. All right, come back in.
Back it up.
Still no? Okay. All right. Sounds good. Okay. Bye.
Not late to pay the thing, because we don't have.
Yeah.
Did he stop?
No.
Or he has to cut that?
I'll give it. Yeah, it's, either way. Here's the camera that's been on for 30 years. Doesn't cut off. They've been on for 30 years. At least. Right on schedule. So, I'm sorry.
Meadows out there now?
You can get a function.
Guessing they waited for that to end.
Yeah.
you see Mark Meadows, the chief of staff, or did he pass?
No, I don't see it.
Who's that camera team up?
Somebody on camera. Tomorrow.
At the sticks.
Yeah.
Two-minute warning. Jerry.
A little bit, a little bit. There. Over here.
PM Eastern Time. The president will speak in Charlotte. We'll have that live for you. And then at immediately following that, we will have our remarks beginning at the rally, peaceful protest in Jacksonville with Liz Willis and Father Frank Pavone. Tune in for that. Now here's Kayleigh McEnany.
Good afternoon, everyone. The radicals are in control of the Democrat Party. Make no mistake, Democrat radicals want to shatter norms and disregard precedent for the sake of the very norms and precedent they claim must be safeguarded. They've proposed court packing, an egregious idea. They've entertained impeachment as punishment for the president exercising his lawful Article 2, Section 2 authority to nominate a justice to the Supreme Court. They've advocated for the abolition of the Electoral College. These are all the tactics that they are using to sow chaos and discord. Likewise, they're endorsing a mass mail-out ballot system that will likely lead to the kind of week-long delay New York witnessed in its recent primary. Far-left radicals resort to tactics like this to push their extreme agenda because they cannot win on the merits. They cannot succeed based on the will of the American people. This administration will continue to call out these tactics while Democrats should end their petty politics and get to work. And with that, I'll take questions. John.
Yeah, Kayleigh, I wonder if you can just clean up or clarify something the president said yesterday. If he loses this election, can you assure us that there will be a peaceful transfer of power?
You are referring to the question asked by the Playboy reporter, right?
I'm referring to the president being asked if there would be a peaceful transfer of power, and he did not say yes.
Yeah,
so
I believe.
Will there be a peaceful transfer of power if he loses this election?
I believe that question asked by the Playboy Power. In fact, I think I have it right here. He was asked win, lose, or draw whether he would accept the transfer of power. I'm not entirely sure if he won why he would accept a transfer of power. That is maybe the deranged wish of that reporter, but that's not how governing works.
Very direct and very simple question. If the president loses this election, will this White House, will this president assure us that there will be a peaceful transfer of power? It's a very simple question.
The president will accept the results of a free and fair election. But I think that your question is more fitting to be asked of Democrats who have already been on the record saying they won't accept the results of an election. In fact, I have several of them here for you. South Carolina Democrat Jim Clyburn has said that Trump is not going to win fairly. Senator Barbara Boxer has said that the only way Trump will win is to steal it. That's according to Democrat Senator Barbara Boxer. The Washington Post has noted, they have a headline, Democrats may not trust the results of the election if Trump wins. And then you have that beautiful quote from Hillary Clinton that Joe Biden should not concede under any circumstance. So I think your fitting is a fitting question for Democrats. Yes.
Kayleigh, just to understand this clearly, are the results legitimate only if the president wins?
The president will accept the results of a free and fair election. He will accept the will of the American people.
So for clarity, if he loses and it's free and fair, he will accept it.
I've answered your question. He will accept the results of a free and fair election.
Let me ask you about Breonna Taylor, if I can right now. First of all, just a little housekeeping. Has the president spoken to the family of Breonna Taylor?
I'm not aware of any conversation that they've had, but our hearts do go out to her family.
Has the president spoken to the officers who were shot last night in Louisville?
I'm not aware of any conversations.
So the president spoke to the officers who were shot in Los Angeles, but to this point, there's no indication the president at any point over the last several Breonna Taylor. I guess why not?
The president routinely speaks to victims of horrendous tragedies. I've been here when he's met with the parents who lost their children to instances of police brutality. It was a really beautiful meeting, and the president consoled them. He's talked to the widows who've lost their husbands to police officers. He's spoken to widows of fallen soldiers. He routinely reaches out to victims of all kinds of atrocities, and he'll continue to do that.
What is the president's message to the family of Breonna? I heard what you say that we grieve for them, but what is the president's message to the family of Breonna Taylor that does not believe they received justice?
That our hearts go out to her. It was a horrible tragedy that happened, and that our hearts also are with the 2 police officers who were shot last night in the Louisville riots.
When you say our, you mean the White House, including the
Yes,
president?
I speak on behalf of the president. Yes.
His thoughts, go ahead.
I am the president's spokesperson. I speak on his behalf, Peter.
In fact, one of the aides just said that the
Ben,
president
go
was his
ahead.
own spokesperson, which is why I asked. But go
Ben.
ahead.
So Kayleigh, yesterday when the president said, get rid of the ballots, there won't be a transfer, frankly, there'll be a continuation. Which particular ballots is he talking about wanting to get rid of, and why does he think that would help him get elected?
The president wants to get rid of mass mail-out voting, and that's not because he said clearly that could go either way. It could damage either candidate's chances because it's a system that's subject to fraud. In fact, in the last 24 hours, police in Greenville, Wisconsin found mail in a ditch, and it included absentee ballots. And also, I can confirm for you that Trump ballots for the president were found in Pennsylvania, and I believe you should be getting more information on that shortly. Here in the last 24 hours, they were found cast aside.
So why in the past hour did the president tweet out, vote by mail ballots in my home state of Florida begin going out today? Make sure you request yours, fill it out, and send it in.
The president has always made the distinction that absentee ballots, where you go through a process where you request a ballot and you mail that in, that is a system that works. But a system where you mass mail out to voter rolls, which are not kept and maintained, where in Los Angeles County, for instance, you have 120% of the county enrolled, that system is untenable. It doesn't work. It leads to what we saw in Nevada, where there were ballots languishing in trash cans and pinned to apartment boards.
And finally, today, FBI Director Wray testified on the Hill that he has not seen historically any kind of coordinated national voter fraud effort in a major election, whether it's by mail or otherwise. So if the president's own FBI director says this isn't a problem, why does the president keep saying it is?
Well, as Attorney General Barr has said, we've never had an election where we've done mass mail-out voting like this before. I would point you to a bipartisan study done by none other than Jimmy Carter, who said that these mail-in votes remain the largest source of potential fraud. And he even cited an example of a 1997 Miami mayor election that resulted in 36 arrests for absentee ballot fraud. That election had to be rerun and the results were reversed. That is an example from 1997, but there are many others like Patterson, New Jersey, where 4 men were charged with voting fraud recently. 4 more men were charged in California, and there's a ton of examples. I could get you an encyclopedia of fraudulent examples we've had.
Ballots are going out. If the president does win, will he still think it was rigged and fraudulent?
I've already answered this question. Yes.
Kayleigh, the president's niece filed a lawsuit in New York State Court today, alleging that the president and 2 of his siblings had cheated her out of millions and squeezed her out of the family business. And we were hoping to get reaction from the White House.
Yeah, the only fraud committed there was Mary Trump recording one of her relatives, and she's really discredited herself. Yes.
Kayleigh, on TikTok, we know that the CFIUS negotiations are continuing. Can you say, has the president been briefed in the last couple days about how the CFIUS negotiations are going? Do you know when those negotiations will end?
Yeah, not that I'm not aware of his briefing schedule with regard to TikTok, but what I can say is what the president has said, which is that any deal has to be 100% as far as national security is concerned. And I'd refer you to his comments as well as of those from the Department of Treasury for any further specifics. I'd refer you there. Yes. Seth.
Thank you, Kayleigh. The president suggested yesterday that he might overrule stricter standards at the FDA on the coronavirus vaccine. Why would the president not want strict standards for a vaccine on the coronavirus?
Well, the FDA does have strict standards. They are the gold standard with regard to vaccines. The president was referring to the normal interagency process that happens with guidance, and that includes running through the Office of Management and Budget. So that's standard operating procedure. And I would also point out, I spoke to Dr. Hahn this morning, and Dr. Hahn said that the guidance issued was a follow-up to June 30th guidance that they put out, and it was guidance that they gave to pharmaceutical companies to provide them with more regulatory clarity. Yes.
Kayleigh, the White House is describing this healthcare event today as a chance for the president to outline his vision. Is that something less than his plan? And just a second part of that, does the White House think that it can address the country's challenges with healthcare solely through executive action?
So the president will be laying out his healthcare vision today. I don't want to get ahead of exactly what that will look like. There will be some tangible actions taken, as well as the president really laying out, something that I think has been overlooked, the real contrast between what Obamacare gave us between 2013 and 2017 and what the president has delivered. And I think we have a graphic to that effect. I'm not sure if they were able to put it together in time. But with Obamacare, it is a fact that from 2013 to 2017, premiums in this country went up. In fact, they went up by 105% on the individual market. And you contrast that with President Trump, what he's managed to do by rolling back a lot of Obamacare. And we've seen premiums on the individual market go down. Same for Medicare Part D and Medicare Advantage, the polar opposite of what happened with Obamacare, where those premiums went up. So premiums have come down under this president. Drug prices have come down under President Obama. Drug prices were up 15%. Under President Trump, they came down for the first time in 50 years. And then finally, under Obamacare, you had choice that went down. 1/3 of counties had only one insurer in the individual market. And with President Trump, there are new affordable options like AHPs, STLDIs, and HRAs, healthcare reimbursement arrangements, as well as employer-sponsored insurance that has gone up. We've seen an increase of 1.5 million in 2019. So these principles have undergirded the Trump presidency, and he will use many of the same principles going forward. And you'll get his comprehensive healthcare vision that will include some action items here in short order.
Is this the extent of the plan, or is there more after this?
This is going to be his full vision that he has been talking about over the last few weeks, and it'll be in Charlotte, North Carolina today. Yes.
Thanks so much, Kayleigh. I wanted to ask about the Supreme Court considerations. Has the president met with all the top candidates that are under consideration? Are there any others? Who else is he? Are there any others that he still plans to meet with? Judge Lagoa, for example, does he still plan to meet with Judge Lagoa?
So I'm not going to get into the president's private meetings with these candidates. He's noted that there are 5 he's considering. They all fall in the same mold as textualists, originalists, Constitution-abiding judges.
On another note, today at the Supreme Court, when the president approached, was paying his respects to Justice Ginsburg, there were some people in the crowd that started to chant to respect her wishes, to uphold her wishes. Do you have some thoughts on those chants, which also, included vote him out?
Yeah, I think the chants were appalling, but certainly to be expected when you're in the heart of the swamp. I travel with the president all across the country, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Florida, Nevada, and everywhere we go, the streets are lined with support like I don't think any other president has had previously. But with regard to precedent, as I've noted before, 29 times has an appointment been made in an election year, 29 times. And that was all 29 times when there was a vacancy at hand. So the precedent is very much on our side here. And I would also note the hypocrisy of Democrats. Joe Biden saying, I would go forward with the confirmation process as chairman, even a few months before an election. Barack Obama saying, fill the Supreme Court vacancy when it was his tenure. And you had Kamala Harris saying as well, that Senate GOP is holding SCOTUS hostage for political gain. Join me in calling them to consider President Obama's nominee. So they've really flipped here because the precedent is on our side and their hypocrisy is on full display. Yes.
The former number 2 of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Paul Selva, who served under President Trump, he and 500 other national security and military leaders, they endorsed Joe Biden today. Do you guys have a comment on that, given that it doesn't seem like Jim Mattis and Joe Dunford, who also served under the president, are rushing to support in this election?
Yeah, I think the president's record speaks for itself. Our military men and women, our veterans, love this president for a very distinct reason. Under Obama, Biden, sequestration really gutted our military. You had the Navy at its smallest point ever, and the other military branches were absolutely gutted. Then you had President Trump, who came in and secured a record amount of funding for our military and our Department of Defense and built up our military. When it comes to veterans, the appalling way that our veterans were treated at the VA under Obama, Biden, there was an IG report that as many as 300,000 veterans, think about that, 300,000 veterans could have died waiting for care. This president came in, put in the VA Missions Act, secured real choice and options for our veterans. And that's the reason that the military and our veterans love this president.
But why is Selva endorsing Joe
I
Biden?
can't speak to one person's reasoning, but this president, when you look at what he's done, bringing our troops home and all he's done in aggregate, the rank and file in this military love this president. Yes.
Thanks, Kayleigh. Two quick follow-ups on what's been discussed earlier. Does the president still have confidence in the FDA commissioner based on his comments yesterday?
There are no changes. Dr. Hahn is FDA commissioner. So yes.
And to follow up, you said that you thought the chants outside the Supreme Court this morning were appalling. Is there any issue with people peaceably demonstrating and chanting at the president?
No, of course, everyone has a First Amendment in this country, but I thought it was an appalling and disrespectful thing to do as the president honored Justice Ginsburg. Yes.
What was the emergency call the president left yesterday's briefing to take?
I'm not going to get into a readout of the president's calls, but he regularly takes very important phone calls. Yes, definitely.
What is the likelihood that Sudan will be the next country to recognize Israel? And are there any new developments that you're expecting after the Emirates and Bahrain recognized Israel?
So the president has noted that there are several other countries that want to make agreements of this sort. I won't confirm exactly which country will be next, but rest assured, the world has looked at what this president did. Historic agreements between the UAE and Israel and Bahrain. And you see deals like you haven't seen in a quarter of a century. It was 26 years. Between the second and the third deal, and just 29 days between the third and the fourth. This president's the only president to have overseen the normalization of relations between Israel and two Middle East countries. To have two on his watch is a really big deal, and no wonder 2 Nobel Peace Prize nominations as well. Yes, Louis.
Yeah, thank you. What's the status of coronavirus vaccination this year? Do you expect this to be available before Christmas?
We do expect to have a vaccine by the end of the year. That has always been the goal, and we are still on track for that. It's very important that what the president has done with regard to commercial level manufacturing. As Dr. Salawi told me, the fact that you have scaled up to manufacture these vaccines in advance is something that this president has done, because he's a businessman and thinks through exactly how to get a safe and effective vaccine delivered at record speed. And part of that has entailed manufacturing in advance. And to do this, it normally takes years to scale up to commercial level production, but this president has done it in just a few short months. And if we have this vaccine by the end of the year, it will be the fastest pace for a vaccine for a novel pathogen in history. Yes.
Thank you, Kayleigh. I wanted to go back to mail-in voting for just a bit. Right now, 5 states conduct elections entirely by mail-in prior to the pandemic with no cases or no major cases of fraud. Does that success not give the president confidence in mail-in voting?
So those states have had time and a history of doing having a workable system, and one that has been done for many years, for many election cycles, to move the entire country to mass mail-in voting all at once and have an entirely new system, and do that in just a few short months is an untenable and an unworkable proposition, and one that has shown to not work well at all, especially when you look at the disenfranchisement, which I think is really troubling when it comes to mass mail-in voting. In 2016, you had 1% of ballots thrown out, absentee ballots, that amounted to 319,000 votes thrown out. And if you have the entirety of the country voting by mail, you can imagine that number would be many folds higher than that. And you look just in the primary, where you've seen states try to move to this mass mail-in system. There were 100,000 ballots rejected in California. In New York City, 1 in 5 mail-in ballots were rejected. And as a former DOJ voting rights official said, it's nuts. That is just way too high when 1 in 5 voters, because of mass mail-in voting, have their ballots thrown out.
You said it's the whole
Yes.
country, obviously.
Chanel.
Is that right?
Thank you, Kayleigh. Yesterday, the Senate released an 87-page report on Hunter Biden and Joe Biden's dealings across the border with Ukraine and with Russia. Specifically, it showed Hunter Biden supporting Russian prostitution, human trafficking, receiving $3.5 million from Moscow. The question to you is, does the White House have any intention of helping the DOJ should an investigation be opened up on the Bidens? And number two, do you have a response to Rudy Giuliani yesterday telling us that this should immediately disqualify Joe Biden from his candidacy?
Yeah, that was a very troubling report. I'll leave it to the DOJ as to how they move forward. But I mean, I think this New York Post cover says it all. I heard so much about Russia collusion, but it appears the only collusion going on was between Hunter Biden as he accepted $3.5 million from the wife of the Moscow mayor. Very troubling indeed. And in addition to that, Ukraine money as well. And it's good that the Senate looked into that. But finally, I would like to note the situation in Louisville, Kentucky last night. There were reports of vandalism. There were nearly 100 arrests, and the Trump administration urges calm and reminds those who wish to have their voices heard to do so peacefully. You have a right to peaceful protest as outlined in the First Amendment. And the Attorney General Daniel Cameron said, if we simply act on emotion or outrage, there is no justice. Mob justice is not justice. Justice sought by violence is not justice. It just becomes revenge. And you contrast his message with that of CNN's Breonna Keeler, who said, I question the judgment of the Kentucky Attorney General saying that mob justice is not justice. We know that this is very loaded language. That's an appalling statement from Breonna Keeler at CNN. And what is outrageous about this take is that mob justice is not justice. Hours later, after this comment was made on CNN, 2 police officers were shot. This is not justice. This has nothing to do with politics. It has everything to do with the value of human life and the safety and security of our American cities. And across the country, we've seen our police officers come under fire in the line of duty. In Los Angeles, there was an ambush attempt on 2 police officers. In Phoenix, a U.S. Marshal was ambushed and shot outside a federal courthouse. In Linwood, California, a suspect approached a patrol car and fired a handgun into the passenger side window. And in Suffolk, Virginia, a suspect opened fire on a marked police car, hitting the vehicle 3 times. Our police officers deserve our respect, and the violence that is being committed towards them, and this was just in the last week and a half, is outrageous. And the words of CNN and of Breonna Keeler are outrageous, irresponsible, and we should never hear statements like that, followed by hours later, 2 police officers being shot.
Kayleigh, what does the president believe the
Okay, thank you very much. And we're here today to discuss protecting Americans from censorship, cancel culture, and consumer abuses inflicted by big tech companies. As president, I'm committed to defending the freedom of speech, and you know what's been going on. And we have some very brilliant people in this room, and they've been looking at it for a while. We're joined by Attorney General Bill Barr, Senator Josh Hawley, State Attorneys General Ken Paxton of Texas, Mark Brnovich of Arizona, Jeff Landry of Louisiana, Lynn Fitch of Mississippi, Eric Schmidt of Missouri, Alan Wilson of South Carolina, Sean Reyes of Utah, Leslie Rutledge of Arkansas, and Patrick Morrissey of West Virginia. That's a very talented group of people, I have to say, to have you all in one room. We appreciate it. In recent years, a small group of powerful technology platforms have tightened their grip over commerce and communications in America. They've used this power to engage in unscrupulous business practices while simultaneously waging war on free enterprise and free expression. At the urging of the radical left, these platforms have become intolerant of diverse political views and abusive toward their own users. And I think we could say as abusive as you could possibly be in some cases, right, Josh? You've seen that? For example, Twitter routinely restricts posts expressing conservative views, even from a president of the United States, while at the same time it allows Iran's supreme leader to freely spew vile anti-Semitic hate and even death threats. Every year, countless Americans are banned, blacklisted, and silenced through arbitrary or malicious enforcement of ever-shifting rules. Some platforms exploit their power, acquire vast sums of personal data without consent, or rig their terms of service to coerce, mislead, or defraud, and we've seen it so many times. In May, I directed Attorney General Barr to work with the state attorneys general as they enforce the state laws against deceptive business practices. Today's discussion will focus on concrete legal steps to protect an open internet and a free society, including steps to ensure the social media companies cannot deceive their users with hidden efforts to manipulate the spread of information. This is a very big subject. We're going to be discussing it. We've been discussing it. And over a fairly short period of time, I suspect we'll come to a conclusion. I'd like to ask the Attorney General to say a few words. Bill, please.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. President, for convening this roundtable. And it's a pleasure to have this opportunity to meet with all my colleagues, the state attorneys general and Senator Hawley. And you state attorney generals and I are meeting tomorrow on some of our efforts in related areas. So I'm looking forward to that meeting as well. But we're here today as part of the president's executive order on preventing online censorship. That order tasked the Department of Justice with a number of responsibilities. First, the department was directed by the president to propose legislation to reform Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. That's a provision that provides broad civil immunity to online platforms, both for hosting and for removing third-party content. I'm pleased to report that earlier today, the department, on behalf of the administration, has sent to Congress proposed legislation to reform Section 230. And that legislation addresses concerns about online censorship by requiring greater transparency and accountability when platforms remove lawful speech. Your executive order also directed the department to work with state attorneys general to review how state laws can be used to combat deceptive and misleading online practices. And I'd like to thank my colleagues from the states for joining us to begin addressing this important topic. And I look forward to our broader engagement on that issue. You know, online platforms play a vital role in our society. Nearly everyone relies on platforms now on a daily basis to communicate, to share private information, buy goods, receive news and information. And we've grown to depend on it, and necessarily we have to put our trust in these platforms. But these platforms can abuse those positions of trust, whether by deciding which voices they're going to amplify and which they're going to throttle. And by improperly tracking and collecting user data and even facilitating criminal activity. So the increased size and power of these entities really exacerbates those concerns. And under the president's leadership, this administration is committed to addressing potential abuses of online platforms in a number of important ways. I've already mentioned that we have proposed this legislation that will focus the immunity and make sure it is not a license to abuse and to censor their platforms. We also will provide the ability for individuals to pursue civil claims against online platforms that engage in bad faith censorship. But even in its current form, Section 230 doesn't stop the states, whether they work alone or together or with the Department of Justice. It doesn't prevent the states from using their own state laws against platforms that are engaged in defrauding or misleading users. Section 230 does not bar the states from bringing state law causes of action based on the platform's own conduct, as opposed to its role hosting third-party conduct. And when they engage in unfair and deceptive practices, state AGs can be the tip of the spear. So I'm looking forward to working with all of you. I know some states have already brought some interesting cases against platforms for fraud, deception, and misuse of sensitive personal data. And we think there's ample opportunity to continue those investigations and actions. And I'm looking forward to working with all of you to address that. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Bill. Josh, please.
Well, thank you, Mr. President, for convening this roundtable. It's good to see my former colleagues. Of course, I used to be a state attorney general, so great to see all of you again. Thanks for the tremendous work you're doing. That's right. That's right. Until somebody at this table convinced me to run for something else. But I think that just to amplify the president's remarks, we see in these online platforms the most powerful corporations in the world, maybe the most powerful corporations in the history of the world. They've got more information on Americans than any companies have ever had, any government has ever had. They increasingly control our communication with each other.
So how come I won last time?
Because you beat them at their own game. You were so good at communicating. But and as you know, by the way, it's gotten a lot tougher. It's gotten a lot worse. And as these folks should know, reporters know, because these online platforms increasingly control the flow of news from journalists to the American public. So these are incredibly powerful platforms. They need to be held accountable, and Section 230, reforming Section 230 is a vital part of that.
Thank you, Josh. Been a big factor. Would anybody like to say anything? Anybody in particular?
Sure, Mr. President. Thank you again for convening this, and Attorney General Barr, I appreciate the work we're doing in this investigation of Google. You know, one of the reasons that we were so interested in this is really what you said, Senator Hawley, is that, you know, we're at this point where we have these corporations that have tremendous power. And if we don't step up to the plate now and take a look at what they're doing, how they're doing it, we may never stop it. It may be just unstoppable. Some of them they're really larger than countries and more powerful than countries. And they know more about people than we know about ourselves, which is a little scary. So I appreciate the attorney generals that are working on our case now and that are going forward with other issues. And I think this relationship that we've had with the Department of Justice under you has been just amazing. And I'm really appreciative of it because I think together, and it takes us together to take on some of the forces that we're dealing with. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ken. Well, I think we can say that we're watching them very closely during this election cycle. They're being watched and scrutinized very, very closely by everybody at this table and far beyond this table. A lot of people are watching, and we're going to just see. We see so many things that are unfair, but this is big time, and we'll let you know. We're going to let you know, but it's very serious, very bad, very serious. Lynn, would you like to say something?
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, General Barr. We appreciate it. It's an opportunity for us to all come together and work and hold these big tech companies accountable. This is an opportunity where they've been censoring our freedom of voices, and Americans are just not going to stand for that. And so I appreciate the opportunity for us to all work together to move forward with changing of 230 and change the dynamics of expression for voices.
Thank you, Lynn, very much.
Thank you, Mr.
Anybody
President.
else? Anybody?
Mr. President, I have a story that I think you'll enjoy. When you were being criticized by Twitter related to absentee ballots, that very same day, we concluded an investigation of West Virginia, which affirmed a lot of the very things you were saying. So that type of issue is an example of what can happen when you have these social media companies. There needs to be an advancement of the First Amendment. But I thought you'd appreciate the irony of that very day, that person's going to go to jail now. And meanwhile, Twitter continues to engage and pretend that what's true is not.
The whole thing with your balloting and what's going on with balloting will prove to be one of the great catastrophes in the history of our country, even beyond elections. And the Democrats know it. They know what's going on. They know how it's going on. Who's getting it? Who's sending it? Where is it going? Where is it coming back? Where is it coming from? Are mailmen involved? Who's delivering it? It's a very, very, and they know it's going to be. And all you have to do is look at, as in a case in West Virginia, but many cases, I would say every single case in the last number of years where they've done this. And this is a tiny scale compared to millions and millions of ballots that are being sent. This is going to be one of the great catastrophes and one of the great embarrassments in the history of our country, beyond elections. And the Democrats know it, and they're setting it up for chaos, and that's what they've done. And these media companies, if you criticize it, they flag you, they take you down, they do all sorts of things. And they know it too. They know it too. But you've done a great job when you did that in West Virginia, and it happened to be the same day that we were criticized for just mentioning. You better be careful with unsolicited ballots. See, I think that's a better name, Josh, because they said universal ballots and they had 15 different names. Didn't mean, people said, how does that have to do with being universal? Unsolicited. 80 million unsolicited ballots being sent all over the place. People are going to get them. What the hell is this? What is it? They'll be harvesting them like crazy. I mean, some of the states, they have no signature necessary, no verification necessary. Nevada, you don't have to verify the signature. There's no verification. It is a disgrace that this can happen. Just remember, I told you so. I told you so. We're going to win anyway, I hope. But I'll tell you, it's very tough when you have it's Democrat governors. It's states controlled by Democrat governors. And they're sending them out by the millions. And Josh, it's going to be a mess. And they all know it. And the people that know it the most are the Democrats. They fully know. And then they talk about you're suppressing our right to vote. They're using COVID as a way of scamming the system. And when you talk about foreign countries are nothing compared to what's taking place. And if foreign countries want to, this is an easy system to break into because they'll do counterfeit ballots. They'll do counterfeit ballots by the millions. So when you talk about China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, all the countries you talk about, that's peanuts. That's all peanuts compared to this. But this is their opening because they can use nice, cheap ballots and they can send them out, counterfeit them, and just send them in. This is a disaster, and they should stop it before it's too late. Now, we're before numerous federal judges. From what I hear, great federal judges, and they have the power to stop it. I hope they're watching because somebody's got to make the plea. This is going to be a disaster. I'm not even saying bad for me. It could work both ways. I don't think